Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Years and years ago, actually, it was a long time ago, I was invited to a pitch for an MLM. And I don't have a problem with people who do MLMs. Some people are very successful. They're very passionate about it. We do business in all sorts of ways, and that's just one of the ways. It's not for me, but it is for a lot of people. I know a lot of people have done very well through it and have provided for their families, put kids through college, so on and so forth. I don't have a problem with it. But I got invited to one, and I can't even remember what it was. And again, it's not for me. And so, but I was invited by a friend, and I politely went, politely sat through it, and then politely declined. It just, it's just not for me. And that's okay, right? I used to be a tax consultant. It's not for me. I don't do that anymore. It's just not for me. I could have done lots of things. It's just not for me. But there was a gentleman there with me named John Millen. He wasn't with me. We were both there, and I just got vibes from him right away that it wasn't for him either, right? It wasn't for him. Just looking at one another, and he didn't roll his eyes. I don't think I rolled my eyes. It's just I got a sense from him that it wasn't for him, and I was right. Because he politely declined and he got up. And as we were leaving, we were just kind of, looking at each other. Hey, we should go get coffee. And we did. And this goes back to before I even wrote my first book, Foundational Networking. And the reason I say that is because John was very instrumental in helping me write that book. I wrote the book, shared it with him, and he red-penned all over it. Thank you, John. He prefaced everything by saying, "Don't hate me." But it was great what he did. Had me cut out about 120 pages of a manuscript that I had and flip everything around. So it goes back that far. And we've been friends, and we've never really done anything together, and that's okay. That's probably a good thing because he's off doing his thing and I'm off doing mine. And he is a storyteller. He's a leadership consultant. He helps executives. He truly helps executives. I'm talking Fortune 500 companies, companies and boards that call him in. If you talk to John, he will tell you, he can be very, very selective about the things he takes on, and it's either a heck yes, or it's a no. It just can be that selective and charges. He gets what he asks for. He's not apologetic about it. But he started a newsletter years ago. He started a newsletter years ago. I could cut this out, but I don't. I'm very unapologetic about this. But he's got a newsletter out there called Sunday Coffee, and there was one that caught my attention. Now when I say that, I read his newsletter. They're all good, but I really thought this one played well into what I do here. And the title of it is 4 Reasons Stories Are More Memorable. And I think that this is an important point with respect to networking. Part of networking is being remembered. If you're racing around all the time, and just meeting people, hoping that somebody's going to buy your stuff, air quotes, on a first meeting, you're mistaken. If you're racing around thinking somebody's going to refer you to a great client on that first meeting, you're mistaken. It's about being known, it's about being liked, it's about being trusted. That seldom happens in a first meeting. If it does, you're lucky. Or maybe you're not selling anything of really of that's, I don't want to say of consequence, but has any sort of I'll buy a flower from somebody, right? I'll buy a candle from somebody on a first meeting. You're not going to be my financial advisor on a first meeting or a second meeting. Well, I'm set with my financial advisor, but you get the point. If you're selling something of substance, it's not going to happen in that first meeting. You're going to need time. You're going to need time to develop the relationship, and then you're going to need time to get them to understand, certainly if you're looking for them to refer you, understand what you're looking for. And that's not an easy thing. I have a whole book on it, The 3 Reasons You Don't Get Referrals. I talk about it a lot in there. But, John talks about stories, and you notice that I start my podcast with the story. I didn't always do that. I used to just start it with, hey, here's my podcast, and I would jump into these abstract things. And so I interviewed somebody on the podcast, and they basically pointed it out. It's like, you are killing yourself before you even get going. And that episode is still out there. I can't remember the number. It's still out there. But from that point in time, I have started every podcast with a story because stories draw people in. And that's one of the comments that I get when I'm talking with people or when I'm training people in AmSpirit Business Connections. It's like, man, you have a lot of stories. Well, I have a lot of stories because I've been doing it a long time, but I also have a lot of stories because I try to think in terms of stories. Again, this is one of the benefits of getting to know John Millen. He's like, have a story. Stories are compelling. So, 4 reasons stories are more memorable. He goes, I won't read the whole thing. Maybe I will. I don't know. People don't remember what you say in presentation. That's a fact. He goes on to say it's a sad fact. But it's been proven in research that right after the presentation, people remember about 50% of what you said. The next day, 25%. A week later, 10%. And that's just a 10-minute presentation he's talking about. Not much retention. Only 3%, he says, and other studies have found that people only retain 3% of what they heard. 3%. That's like a baseball player going up to bat and getting a hit 3 times out of 100 at bats. That's pathetic. You don't even make the Little League team at that pace. I'm trying to weave stories into this. You notice I started with a story. I'm trying to have stories with this. But he cites research in here that they find that with stories, what you have to say is 22 times, not 20%, 22 times more memorable than facts alone. So if you feed somebody a fact, I'm a tax attorney, I do this. It's kind of a fact, right? But if you kind of weave it into with a story, I'm going to tell you about what I did. I represented a client before the IRS. The IRS had screwed up something, blah, 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 or whatever, and they were challenging this and that, and I did this and that. Okay, they're going to remember. That's just going to live in a different place in their brain. And there's lots of evidence out there as to how, stories will sit in our brain. And our brains are not really hardwired to understand logic and retain facts for a long time. It does with stories, though. It's like a movie. You think about a movie. I was thinking about a movie last night. A friend of mine got hit with a softball, and the glass is cut above her eye, and so sending me pictures, and I wanted to send to her a clip from the movie Rocky. Now, movie Rocky came out in 1976. There's a scene in the movie where Rocky's fighting Apollo Creed, and he gets battered so bad his eyes are swollen shut and he can't see, and he says, the famous line is, "Cut me, Mick, cut me." That is stuck in my mind since I first saw it in 1976. And you can find the clip on YouTube. If you haven't seen the movie, see the movie. But that's just the power of stories. They just stick in a different place in our mind. And we need to try and employ stories to help our networks certainly get to know, like, and trust us. I mean, you can tell people, well, I'm an honest person, and I guess that's a matter of opinion, I'm reliable. Those are all matters. But if you share a story about something that you did, I had a client come in and, they, somebody was, a client come in, say you're a mechanic, a client comes in and they were talking to another mechanic and to charge them thousands of dollars to do A, B, and C. And I said, well, you know what? You do probably need to do A, B, and C, but it's not going to be that price. And you know what? You really don't have to have C done right now. Let's just worry about A and B, and here's kind of a less expensive workaround. When you share that story with somebody, I don't have a great story for that. I should. My mechanic is notorious for. My mechanic could be retired right now if he had just a scintilla of dishonesty. He doesn't. Shout out to Don Gabe. But just the stories. I've gone into Don. Don. And my wife brought her van into somebody. Just it's on the way to work. Brought it in, and they right away it's $800. It's like what are you doing? What are you doing? Let's take it to Don. You take it to Don. Don's like, no, it wasn't that at all. It's this, and it's only $300. I mean, it was right there. Don could have said, hey, $800. We'd have been like, okay, if Don's saying it's $800, it's $800. But again, those are great stories that Don could. He didn't have to say he's honest. He can just share stories. We can share stories. We can share stories about the types of things that we do. Stories stick in people's mind, like that scene in the movie Rocky. I'm not a neurologist. I don't understand brain science. I read a lot on it. But what I surmise is that with respect to stories, we're playing a movie in people's minds. And that's really good for us to kind of keep track of those movies. And so we tell somebody a story. It's a little movie that they're able to replay. Whereas the numbers, it's just hard there's nowhere for that number to sit or those facts to sit in people's brains. But the brain is hardwired to hang on to those little movie clips. And stories create those little clips. And you become, as John points out in his post, you become 22 times more memorable with stories rather than facts. I will put a link to the article in the show notes. But as you work with your network, as you talk with people, going to a meeting today, think about some stories you can tell. Get good at telling stories. Get good at weaving short little stories into your conversations. People will be fascinated, they'll be entertained, but most importantly, they will remember you.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.